Hey everybody, Dustin DePirac here, columnist Jeremy Price, back here at Assembly Hall where Indiana has re-staked its claim to number one. Big win tonight. Indiana wins 81-73 over previously number one Michigan. IU was the number 3 team. Number 2 Kansas lost in stunning fashion to Oklahoma State today, and that means probably Monday morning unless AP voters decide to get, I don't know, difficult's not the word, or creative, and make Florida number one. I think Hugh probably is going to make Florida number one, actually. That's, so you guys can send hate mail to him. Hi, Hugh. Miss you, buddy. But yeah, basically just a huge statement win in just so many ways. It looked like it was going to be maybe a blowout for a minute there. They were actually up 20-7 at one point, 28-13. I think they had just a big lead early. It looked like they might, just run away with it, and the Assembly Hall was going to come down on Michigan's heads. Michigan wasn't going to let that happen. Basically, just made it a game. But at the end of the day, IU just kept making big plays every time they really had to. Every time it seemed like Michigan was right there and ready to take over some momentum, IU just kept, making big plays, getting big free throws, rebounds, everything basically to keep this one and make sure that they won this game and didn't lose it.
They did. They had an answer for every run that Michigan made, and they had basically too many weapons in the end was what it came down to. And I say that at both ends of the floor, really. I mean, a variety of guys guarded Trey Burke tonight. Zeller and Watford both had good nights on the boards. Hollowell provided some good minutes, some good work on the boards, a couple of blocks, things like that. Just the overall contributions for Indiana, even though it was the starters that did most of the scoring, was just more
bench
than
everybody.
Was just more than Michigan had, which Michigan was pretty much the Trey Burke show tonight.
Right. There's so many points to touch on there, and the Trey Burke situation is interesting. Now Trey Burke gets 25 points and 8 assists. He's Trey Burke. That stuff happens, and it looks like a huge night. But he had to go 9 for 24 to do that. Number one. Number two, I thought the way that they changed defenders on him was really, really interesting. And was actually talking with somebody. I got to credit this line because it wasn't mine. Mike DeCourcy was of Sporting News said, it was kind of like he used Victor Oladipo as Mariano Rivera as a closer, and that's a lot of ways the way it was. I mean, Yogi Ferrell kind of got the start tonight, and went the allotted amount of innings that you were asking for him. I mean, he probably, if this were a baseball game, you got a good 5 or 6 a quality start out of Yogi Ferrell on Trey Burke, but they mixed Will Sheehy in there, they mixed Victor Oladipo in there, and when it came winning time, Oladipo was the guy that was on top of him, and it seemed to me like when Oladipo was on Burke, it seemed like Burke's eyes got real big, and he sort of realized, wow, I'm dealing with a force here.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of that, and I think it was just a cumulative effect of the multiple defenders that IU put out there. And I thought Will Sheehy really did a good job most of the first half.
Even the shot he drilled over him at halftime,
that was just a great shot.
That was just an amazing shot. I mean, Will was all over him, did everything you're supposed to do, and Burke just knocked it down because he's Trey Burke.
But I think rotating those defenders and making Burke work that hard and put up 24 shots and everything that went with it, I think wore him down. I went back and looked. He made just 2 of his last 8 field goal attempts, and that included a 3 with about 25 seconds there when it was pretty much out of reach.
Yeah, that
was a bomb too.
Yeah, the ones that they were putting up, the ones they managed to make in the last minute, I mean, whether they were defended well or not, I mean, they were huge. I mean, they were by a long shot. They were, either defended or just sort of ridiculous. Just how are you going to stop that? But no, that was actually, he just seemed like, wore out might be a little bit much, but I mean, it just kept getting harder. He was just frustrated on some level. I mean, he still did a lot. I mean, he still had a big night, but it just everything was hard for him to come by. There were not a lot of easy ones for him tonight at all, and that was because of just how much they moved stuff around.
Yeah, Indiana made him work for everything he could get, and he really wasn't able to get his teammates going, even though he did have 8 assists. But he got a few to McGarry in the first half. McGarry finished with 10 tonight. Hardaway got going a little bit in the second half, but again, several of those threes were late, where it was kind of desperation. Fire the 3 times. So, and Hardaway, of course, got in foul trouble. So any
which was
momentum
big.
he had was kind of stymied by
the
that.
Hardaway foul trouble helped a lot because they didn't have to put. For a lot of times they were able to put Oladipo on Burke. They didn't have to worry about Hardaway. Now sometimes they did late, and it was kind of a risky move, but and I guess it paid off at the end. I mean, in some cases they lost on it. They put either Ferrell or Hardaway on, and Ferrell or Halls on Hardaway. And in a couple cases he took advantage of that. Basically, and there were a few occasions where they set a screen and basically swallowed Halls up. And it was like Mitch McGarry on Halls, and that's tough when you're 6 feet, 180, and you're dealing with 6'10", 250. Not easy to get around that, and Hardaway was able to get some threes that way, but it didn't burn them bad enough that putting Oladipo on Burke for a stretch wasn't a good idea. It did help them. A huge big. Christian Watford had a just monster, I think, offensive and defensive effort tonight. It kind of got lost in the whole thing, but Glenn Robinson only had 2 points in this game, was 1 for 6 from the field, 4 rebounds, and only 2 offensive boards. I mean, in a lot of ways, Robinson can crash and can get up and can just jump as a really athletic guy. Watford played, I think, as physical a game as we've seen him play. I mean, he's had some in there. I mean, there have been some, games where he hasn't been as physical as you wanted to see him, but he played like a man tonight, for sure.
He did. And we talked about this last time, too, that he's developing a level of consistency, and you almost getting to the point where you expect, obviously, 12, 14 points, and then 7, 8, 9, 10 rebounds a game at this point out of Christian Watford. And that's exactly what IU needed out of him coming into this season.
Yeah, exactly. And Cody Zeller played like a Player of the Year candidate tonight. I mean, I said it in my story. I don't think this makes him a front runner again, but he's back in that discussion based on the way he played tonight. 19 points, 9 rebounds, 8 for 10, and just the dunks he was throwing down. I mean, basically, there was a couple of times where Oladipo got to the rim, threw one up, and just couldn't get much on really of the rim. I mean, he was kind of just banked a couple off, and Zeller was just there and just threw it down. And it was at occasions where they just needed something momentum-wise. They needed something just to get the crowd back into it because maybe they definitely obviously turned the ball over way too much tonight, gave it away 16 times, and let Michigan back in the game that way. But every time it seemed like Michigan was right there ready to take over, you saw a Cody Zeller dunk or something like that.
Yeah, he had a lot of big answers. He had a big follow dunk in the first half that kind of stemmed a little bit of the Michigan momentum at the time. Same thing in the second half. And yet, the biggest play of the game from Cody Zeller might have been that loose ball that he chased down. I think he went from the right block almost all the way to mid-court to chase that one down.
Yeah.
Just a fantastic play.
No, that was huge. I mean, Tom Crean pointed that out, and I think that was just the one play that really stood out in everybody's mind. It's, they were up by, I think, 7 at the time, 6 or 7, and it was kind of in that spot where if they turn the ball over there, if they don't get a good possession, or if they don't get a score, Michigan's got a chance to make it a 2-possession game or, basically a short 2-possession game, like a 4-point game. And they obviously had the weapons to do it at that point in time. And he saves that ball. Yogi Ferrell ends up getting fouled. I mean, the stats on it I don't even get because he didn't get an offensive rebound for that. At least on the score sheet that I saw, I don't really understand it. But one way or another, I mean, he had to go a long way. And you think you mentioned on the live chat, I mean, that's not what they mean when they say run the floor, but that's a case of a 7-foot guy being extremely athletic. I can't imagine another 7-footer going that far to get a rebound and getting it that crucial a time.
No, it's a combination of
his
athleticism, his quick feet, and just simply his desire to win. And that's what it comes down to. I mean,
yeah, and that play just kept going. The ball just kept bouncing around, and he just would not give up on it. He just refused to let that thing go out of bounds. And that's a winner's play, basically. I mean, that's a sign of intelligence, of hustle, of heart, of all that kind of stuff. I mean, and you just don't see guys who can move like that and can, that size. I mean, just a humongous play for Zeller all around. Obviously Yogi Ferrell. Another big night, huge free throws down the stretch. I think he was 8 of 8 at the line, 6 of 6 in the last 40 seconds. Jordy Hulls hit some big threes. Jeremy Hollowell had his best game. I mean, at least since the beginning of the year when he was going against lesser competition. But Hollowell, 3 big blocks. Really, that was the thing that stood out. He had 4 points, 3 big blocks, 4 rebounds. Definitely stepped up there. Just kind of across the board tonight. And This gets them back to number 1, and this time they really have earned it. They deserve it. You can't, say that this is a paper ranking.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that they took the number 1 ranking for granted to start the season necessarily, but it seems like lately, I don't know what you want to call it, if they're playing with a little more of a chip on their shoulder, or, big picture, we talked about Zeller's play running that ball down, all the other guys, Watford come up big, everybody that Oladipo. There's just a certain attitude that this team's developing right now to make plays when they need to make plays.
Right.
And that's probably the biggest difference from Indiana now to 3-4 weeks ago.
Right. No, and part of it is that they're in a position where they have to make plays. I mean, I think they're also rising to the moment where there just wasn't so much a moment. And really, you got to give them credit for this fact, the fact that they didn't play in a lot of big games early. But I mean, they obviously took the lessons from the ones that they lost, and kind of the the Minnesota game that they almost lost. And they had a huge lead early. They took lessons from those games. Even though there weren't a lot of weren't a lot of classes for them, I guess you could say. They didn't have a lot of those games that asked a lot from them. That asked for big plays down the stretch, but they took what they had and they learned from it, and also, I mean, they just rose to the occasion. I mean, there wasn't a game like Michigan State before Michigan State, really. I guess Minnesota was, but and there certainly hadn't been a game like Michigan yet, and they realized what was at stake, I guess, and they realized that every play was going to matter, and they played that way, and they attacked every single possession, even when, even the mistakes they made tonight, I think, were trying to do too much.
And I think that they finally see a prize to play for now. There's the Big Ten championship, there's a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, and all those things. Now there's something kind of
Every
more
single one of these games matter for that. Yeah,
now.
every single one of these games matter for that and do stand out. They have legitimate significance. That, I mean, this game, this puts Indiana. I mean, obviously, they're number one. Going to be number 1 ranked. I mean, this is step 1 to getting a number 1 seed. I mean, basically, you got to presume that either Indiana or Michigan is going to have a number 1 seed. I think at this point, at the end of the year, maybe both will.
Yeah.
But really, it's the Michigan games that are going to determine who's number 1 in Indy. Who gets that home number 1 seed. So like those games are obviously huge, and they I think recognize like Northwestern and Penn State in those games don't grab you the same way. And it's not that they took those games for granted. It's not that they didn't play hard. It's not that they weren't focused. But this is just a different level when game day comes in and all that kind of stuff. I mean, when you just know that they're that big, and they've responded to that the way that a championship team is supposed to.
They've won games now that they were kind of expected to over the last week or two, with Michigan State at home, going on the road to Purdue, and now winning a game that I wouldn't say they were expected to, but that they knew they needed to.
Yeah, this is the game that they had to win to show that this is a championship level team, and you don't know if they win the whole thing. It's a long way till April 6th, 8th, whatever it is now, but they look like they can do it. Thanks, guys.